CNT125, Chapter 11, we're on the section on AAA, Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. This is all in the name of making sure the right people, the right users have access to the network, controlling what they're allowed to do, and then keeping track of what they're doing, logs and so forth, so that we're aware of anything that might be out of the ordinary. Okay, this is pronounced AAA. And these are really the components required to manage access control. Who has access to what? So the three pieces: authentication. This is user authentication. This is usually verifying a user's credentials, name and password, to grant access to network, server resources, etc. And this is really asking the question, who are you? Are you really Doug Brown, that's an employee here in the company, or are you somebody acting as Doug Brown? The authorization part is determining what this user can and cannot do. Are they able to access this folder on the server? Are they able to access this folder on the server, etc.? So this is answering the question, what are you allowed to do? Well, Doug Brown, the employee, has access to this level of stuff, but Doug Brown, the department level lead, now has access to this stuff, and Doug Brown, the vice president, now has access to this stuff. So depending on who you are in the company, what are you allowed to do? What are you allowed to have access to? And accounting piece, this is going to log the user's access and activities on the network. What did you do? Did you log in and save a file and then exit out? Did you log in and try to edit files and log out? What did you try to do? These logs can be important to help troubleshoot and or find if there's anomalies going on. So authentication, back to the authentication piece now. That was a quick summary of. Users can be authenticated to a local device or to a network. Local authentication, signing on to a Windows user local account. This is stored local on the machine. A network authentication, you sign into a network using a network user account stored in something like a Windows server, Windows Active Directory domain on a Windows server. Now, instead of being authenticated locally, you're authenticated by the server in the network. Local authentication performed on your local device. Username and password stored locally. They have some pros and cons to this. The first is low security. Most user devices are less secure than network servers. You can usually brute force around an account on a local device. And if you have the same kind of credentials on more than one system, once they hack the first one, now they have access to maybe a couple other systems. Okay, and this does not allow for remotely locking down that user account if there's an error. The convenience varies. Managing local accounts can be easier than setting up a Windows domain, true. But convenience of local authentication declines considerably after you have a dozen devices. Now I have to go to 24 computers and manage the accounts on, instead of doing it all in one central system. Reliable backup access. Network server failure, only workable option is local authentication. Yep. Networking device servers should be configured with a local privilege account used when authentication services on the network are unavailable. And they should still have very secure credentials on that. So group policy, with group policy now, Windows console that controls what users can do and how the system can be used. This is, you make entries in your registry, applying these scripts to the Windows startup, shutdown, etc. And it basically permits what that person can and cannot do on that system. And this in here, as a group policy, maybe make it a user. They can't go in and change the computer name. They can't go in and change the computer IP, those sorts of things. That'll limit what they're able to do. With local authentication, every computer on the network is responsible for securing its own resources. As the network grows, this can become an administrative nightmare to maintain all these local accounts on all these computers. That's when you move to having a server do this management for you. We can switch from local authentication to network in your network settings, and where you go to like your computer name settings and so forth. You can do the whole change to from a work group to a domain. Once you belong to a domain, you're now having that workstation authenticated by a Windows server, by a server. With your authentication, regardless whether you run your network on a Windows, Mac, Linux, you can harden your network by securing the passwords. So additional restrictions to help can be, these are some additional things that can be done. We can adjust or restrict the time of day. Maybe they're only allowed to log in during work hours. That can usually be done in your server, indicating the hours that login can occur. You know, making sure Sunday and Saturday are not there and only work hours during the week kind of thing. Total time logged on. If this account is trying to stay logged on too long, it would log them out. That would be potentially suspicious or potentially a security breach. So we can restrict the amount of time logged on. Source address, where is it coming from? Where's this login coming from? It can be made to be only in the company resource. They can't log in from home, if you will. So only from on-site could they log in. And unsuccessful login attempts. After so many unsuccessful login attempts, the account gets locked. Most of us are aware of that. Most of us have encountered that one point or another. That can be set in your server as well. You can set that here of how many unsuccessful login attempts can be done. Geographic location as well. Depending on where they are, location-wise, could they log in or have access to. So authorization now. So that was the authentication phase. That was the first A. Now we move on to the second A, authorization. So with authorization, what are you able to do? What are you able to do with that resource or on the network? So user access to network users, two categories. The privilege or right to execute, install, and uninstall software. Permission to read, modify, create, delete data, files, and folders. What are you able to do in the network? Well, a lot of times this is done by role-based access control. What is your role in the company? What is your role in that facility? If you're just a plain user, you're given certain permissions and rights. As you move up in your roles, you might get more rights or more privileges to certain parts or certain pieces of the network. And this is usually implemented in your role-based, in your Windows server on what role you are, what type of role are you, and that kind of sets up permissions about what you're allowed to do. And that's your authorization. What are you allowed to do in the network? With accounting, we now want to keep track of what people are doing. What did they do? So, with your separation duties, refers division of labor, ensures no person can single-handedly compromise security of data. Sometimes the sensitive and privileged responsibilities are distributed to multiple people. That way, not one person is responsible for all of it, or if one person were to get sick and be out, we're not stuck because that person had access to everything and nobody else does. A log file needs to be installed so we can monitor what gets done and look for any suspicious events, anything that's out of ordinary. And that's where the logs come in. Logs generate, systems generate, so the administrator can troubleshoot and audit these systems. Linux and Macintosh, most logs are generated as text files. Windows, you can use the event viewer to view the logs. And this allows you to see what has been going on. These are all kinds of different logs that can be viewed over here and what is it going on. You can see the time and what particular thing occurred. Same thing here on Windows. There's a number of different categories. And you can see what has occurred at what time by what person. And that would allow us to start zeroing in on maybe the cause of a certain fault. This information can be shared with your SEM. This is a system that's designed to evaluate all these logs and look for significant events that we would need to alert the IT staff for. Maybe there is multiple failed login attempts. Maybe there is multiple attempts at trying to log into one of the routers using Telnet or something like that. That would alert us. This would look for those kind of things and alert us so we wouldn't have to look through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of logs, if you will. Authentication technology. So for the authentication phase, so there we real quickly hit all three. All three, I'm scrolling right back through here. We real quickly hit all three. The authentication, authorization, counting. So now we'll look at some of the authentication technologies. So scrolling down here. Okay. Authentication protocols are rules that computers follow to accomplish authentication. Several types of authentication services and protocols exist. Directory services. This is commonly, we think of this as your Windows server. Windows directory services include Active Directory in Windows, Open LDAP. These are ones that you commonly encounter. These are when you have, well, I think I had a picture back here before. Go back here. Even here, you're role-based. In here, you have permissions, you have user accounts and devices, and what these users and devices are allowed to do. That is all part of your directory services. So when we put a user in there like Doug Brown, we have his username, we have his password, and then we also have the device that Doug Brown might be using. And if those two are in there and Doug Brown tries to log in from this device, it's like, okay, is Doug Brown's name and password correct? Yes. Is this device on the list? Yes. So now it's like, okay, we're checking to make sure this is actually Doug Brown, and they're using a device that's supposed to be on the network, and boom, they're allowed in. They're allowed on the network once all that passes. Here shows the example of, you put your card into, and you have your password. This is your authentication, and this is going to verify with the bank database, if you will. Is this card and PIN number and this person, does that all agree? In our network, we have a user providing a name and password, and your LDAP, local lightweight directory access protocol, is running to verify with the authentication directory, Active Directory. Is this person, Doug Brown, here? Is the password right? Is this computer here? Is that computer right? And then that would allow that person and that device onto the network, into network resources. Kerberos. This is a authentication protocol configured by default on Active Directory. This is a cross-platform authentication protocol, meaning it can work with multiple operating systems. It's going to use key encryption to verify identity in clients. Okay, key encryption is going to be more secure than just plain password, if you will. Actually, I'm sorry. This for your encryption, for the key encryption, is going to be a lot more secure for transferring data back and forth, and so it's not in clear text and so forth. There we go. I'm getting it out. Mr. Brown's a little tired today. Your private key encryption service considered especially secure. That's what we're using there for the authentication process. Kerberos does not automatically trust your clients. It requires the clients to prove identity through a third party. That is your ticket authority, your encryption service, your private key encryption, your key exchange, your certificate authority. I'll get it out yet. Certificate authority. All these communications are encrypted, and you run into these kind of things when you're dealing with. And I think they have over here. Yes, they have here with the user trying to log in. Hey, I would like to be able to log in. Okay, here's your ticket, almost like getting a ticket to amusement park kind of thing. And then it's going to verify and actually verify that yes, this is all correct. Now you have access to this resource that you're trying to save a file to or get a file from. Single sign-on is an example of. Kerberos is an example of single sign-on. This gets used in a lot of facilities where you have one login account that has access to multiple resources. And you might, in some cases, use two-factor authentication, which a lot of us are used to using. Two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, you plug in a password, but that you also provide a key or code that gets texted to you. And now I have the username and password, and then I also have this code that was sent to me. And that allows for the additional security check. Sometimes a security token gets used as well, and this would be the code that gets plugged in addition to your username password.